Welcome to Let's Get Real on Talk 910 KNEW. I'm your host, Alan Taylor, and I'll be with you for the next hour. I have a guest with me tonight, Stephen Wingate. I'm going to introduce Stephen a little bit differently tonight than I usually do. And frankly, it's because the stories that the stories about the guests that come on my show are pretty much the same. They're all pretty much the same. 20 years of searching, 25 years of searching. I went here, I went there. I was attracted to this religion or this modality or this practice. And then, and then they found some way that got them to where they found what was being pointed out to them. And here they are now being teachers. And so instead of reading Stephen's story, what I'm going to read to you is a personal note that he has up on his website that I just find really touching and important because it's so personal, and it also is so relevant and sounds so much like probably what a lot of you listening right now are either experiencing or have experienced. So this is how I'm going to introduce Stephen, is by reading this note that he has up on his website, and this is what it says. Your seeking can come to an end. I felt like I was at the end of my rope, completely addicted to seeking, searching, suffering, reading, listening to CDs, watching DVDs, traveling all over the country, meeting teachers, going to retreats and seminars endlessly. I felt that I had a solid intellectual understanding of what Nisargadatta and others were pointing to, and even some great experiences, but I was still seeking and suffering terribly. And then in 2004, Stephen writes that he discovered a teacher by the name of Sailor Bob Adamson, which of course we've talked about many times on this show. Bob Adamson suggested I contact John Wheeler, and John helped clear things up for me. It's such a relief to be free of all of that, and I'm so thankful. I feel driven to share this with anyone who has an interest. I'm happy to share everything I can based on my experience with this. Your seeking can come to an end. Corresponding by email or phone is surprisingly effective. If you'd like to chat by email or phone, feel free, or if you live in the Boston area or are visiting, come by for a visit. Sincerely, Stephen. Stephen Wingate, welcome to Let's Get Real.
Hi, Alan. Thanks, and thanks for reading that note. It sounded good.
Well, you wrote it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just really impressed with it because it really it touches people where they live. I mean, this is what we go through. This is exactly what we go through.
Right, and that note is intended to make this a practical matter because I know all of this Advaita talk and talk of non-duality can become very conceptual. It's very interesting. I love talking about it. It's a great hobby, and eventually, after years of seeking, I mean, it gets old. It gets tiring. It's exhausting.
Exhausting is the right word.
And we really, at some point, we really want to get to the bottom of it. And it's helpful to have someone or to meet someone who's been through a similar experience and can, sort of help us walk us through it and make it become our living experience. And that's the reason I put that note up there, because it is possible to have your seeking come to an end. It's possible to be done with it.
Well, and I think that this is something that we need to hear, because we probably are just very used to thinking, well, no, this has to go on for a long time, if not forever, my seeking, my searching, because I'm not one of those chosen few that gets to wake up. But it's not that way.
No, there's really no chosen few, and that's just part of the problem, is thinking that there are the chosen few. Sure, there are special people out there. We have Mother Teresa and other great saints, but in essence, we're really all the same. And it's helpful to meet someone in the flesh who can help explain this to you, and that's why I'm thankful to John Wheeler, who is just, as you've mentioned, I know you've met him and you've had him on the show, he's just a regular guy.
Yeah.
And he really helped clear things up for me, and I know he's helped quite a few other people.
Yeah, he cleared things up for me as well.
So that's why I have my website up, and I'm making the offer to folks if anyone.
It's extremely generous. I mean, it really is. I mean, the more teachers like you that we have that are offering to do this and making themselves available, and like you say, the phone and the email correspondence can be surprisingly effective, because really what we're doing is we're just trying to get our doubts cleared up. We're just trying to get our questions answered, and then there's nothing else to do.
Right, and there's really two key points that I point to, and John helped point it out to me, and that is one is who we are, or what we are, and that's awareness, that's our essential nature. And then the other is to take a look at what we're not, what we believe that we were. And that's what it really boils down to, and then also all sorts of doubts can come in and sort of appear to fog the picture, and the suffering continues. But if you have someone that is real clear with this, either by email or talking on the phone or meeting them in person, it's possible to clear them up.
It's true, and I really want to encourage anybody listening to take advantage of this. There are a lot of people who are, I have links on my website, who are offering this, and you, Stephen, are offering this, and so please take advantage of this, because your seeking can indeed come to an end. And thank you for letting me just share that part that you put on your website, because I think that that's such an important message to keep reminding people that this doesn't have to just be an endless talk about theory.
Right.
So, and the first thing you mentioned to me about your own teaching is that you like the practical aspect, and you talked to me about the fact that it's possible to be free of psychological suffering. And I'd like you to talk to me about that a little bit.
Right, because even that it can be sort of a concept. You know, we feel like we're suffering, and we hear that term all the time. What does it really mean? What is psychological suffering, and how can we be free of it? So that's the approach I like to take. I like to make it very practical and look into that.
So what is psychological suffering?
Well, psychological suffering, and everyone, we can all look at this from our own sort of practical experience. We can look at what's happening when we're suffering. And we see that it's thought. Thoughts are happening, and it's all thought about me. Me and my story, me and my partner, me and my boss, me and my children, me and my friends,
and my body and my health and my survival.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about me initially.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the first thing we notice, that psychological suffering is thinking, and it's thinking about me. So we take a closer look at it, and we say, well, not all thoughts involve suffering. And I sort of break it down into primary thoughts, or initial thoughts and feelings. You can say initial thoughts, feelings, and sensations. We'll call them primary.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll call the secondary thoughts, feelings, and sensations that come up. And that's where psychological suffering sort of kicks in. For example, there's really no problem with if anger arises. I mean, it's just a feeling.
That's a primary response.
Right. That's a primary feeling.
Uh-huh.
There's no problem
it just comes up.
Right.
It's primary. Okay.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say a discomfort or an uncomfortable feeling in your stomach or chest.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an uncomfortable situation. Or some thought like, oh, I'll never understand this. You know, this is just for special people. I'm doomed to suffer for the rest of my life. Those thoughts come up, and they're sort of uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Those thoughts, feelings, and sensations, those initial thoughts, feelings, and sensations, are really not problematic.
No, they're really not.
It's not really psychological suffering. They just they appear in awareness,
mm-hmm.
and then they pass.
They haven't created any suffering yet at that point.
Right.
They just are there.
Right.
Okay. But then something happens.
Right. And what comes in is I call the secondary
okay.
thoughts, feelings, and sensations, primarily secondary thoughts, and that's the thoughts like, I shouldn't be feeling angry. I've been reading spiritual books for 20 years. I shouldn't be feeling discomfort in my stomach. I shouldn't be feeling anxious. I'm a spiritual person. Something's wrong with me. I have to get back on I have to continue reading spiritual books. I have to go to retreats. I have to talk to my teacher.
Or else and we've got that whole scenario figured out too. Or else I don't know what, appear to my friends to not be as spiritual as they thought I was, or
so
appear to myself as, something less than ideal. All those secondary. I mean, we can go on forever with that.
Right, and it snowballs, and it just expands, and it can. So that's really what. If we take a look in our own personal experience, we'll see that that's really the psychological suffering. It's not the initial thoughts. If we get angry, we get angry. It comes and goes. If we're sad, sadness arises and it passes. And so all thoughts, feelings, and sensations present themselves, and then they pass. It's those secondary thoughts that are that say, I shouldn't be feeling this. I need to do something about this. What's wrong with me? I need to, fix these feelings. I should only be happy. I should never be sad. I should always be patient, loving, and kind. I should never be angry. I'm a spiritual person. Yeah. These secondary thoughts, what do they imply? They imply that there is a sort of an ego, or a separate controlling entity, I call it, a me there that has control over thoughts, feelings, and sensations. That's what those secondary thoughts, which are the psychological suffering, that's what they imply. Okay. They imply I'm in control of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Right. And that's really what needs to be investigated. And that's part, as I mentioned earlier, there's really two parts, if we could break it down and make it that simple. One is what am I? And that is, and we can confirm this from our own direct experience, my essential nature is awareness. And the second part is, what am I not? And that's a part we need to take a look at, and it can be a little more challenging, at least from my personal experience, and that is looking into this sense of being a separate controlling person, or a separate controlling entity, or an ego that has control. That's the part that we really need to look into.
Well, and it's very difficult, because we are completely conditioned and accustomed to thinking that is who we are, and there's practically nothing that points to anything else. So how do we learn this? How do we figure this out?
Right. So what can happen is, through years and years of suffering, as in my case and many others, and many years of trying to take control, trying to have only happy thoughts, trying to always be in control of our feelings and sensations and emotions, trying to be in control of our life, we get to a point where we realize, I can't do it. And there's just a feeling of complete misery, and you have to get to the bottom of it. So this is where, in my experience, you come across these teachings of non-duality, and meet a teacher who can help us with it, who just says, take a look. Take a look in your own personal experience. Can you find a separate controlling entity there? Can you find an ego? What is this me that you think you are? And Ramana Maharshi puts it in general terms, ask, who am I? And other teachers, using different words, will essentially ask the same question. And that's where you really have to take a look. Each of us has to take a look and make this inquiry our own and find out, who am I? And for me, for years I struggled with that, who am I? Who am I? I mean, in looking and trying to find out who I was, and I had no clue. What am I looking for? I don't know what I'm looking for. I know Freud's idea of an ego, and I know of the, all different sorts of ideas of the me and the I, and
the observer and the witness, and
right.
we learn all of that.
Yeah, so we understand that conceptually, but it wasn't striking home. So what I suggested, or what worked for me, is finding out, what does Stephen think? Who or what does Stephen think he is? What do I feel I am? I mean, the search has to really become our own. And when I took a look at that, I felt that if I were to define Stephen, I would say I am a controlling entity. I'm the guide of Stephen's life. I'm the one who's in control. I'm the one who has to resolve this spiritual search. I'm the one who has to guide my life in all aspects.
Yeah.
So let's take a look. I mean, I can feel that. That's what I feel that I am. That's who I felt Stephen was. So now I can take a look and see, is that true? Is there a separate controlling entity there who can exercise control and control Stephen's feelings and thoughts and sensations? Is there anything there?
You've kind of got me in suspense here, Stephen. I can't wait to hear how this comes out.
And so, I mean, I found nothing. I found nothing there. I found no separate controlling entity, no ego, no Stephen, nothing I could point to and say, yes, this is who Stephen is. And I thought, well, that doesn't mean it's not there. I mean, just because I can't find it doesn't mean it's not there. So I thought, well, let's make this practical. If I can't find it, but it's there, let's see if I can exercise control. It may not be there, but maybe it's possible to exercise control. So, because
what you were looking for was some kind of entity that was controlling your life.
Right, I'm looking for the ego, the me, the controlling entity. I can't find anything.
And so now you're just looking for this, still looking for this control. Where's this control coming from?
Right.
Okay.
So I can't find a controlling entity, but let me see if I can exercise control.
Okay.
Let's see if I can control my thoughts, my feelings, and sensations. See if I can take control. Okay, go ahead now. Do it.
Yeah.
Can't do it. If we try to have only happy thoughts for the next week, can't do it. If we say we have an experience of peace and joy arise, try to grasp onto that and hold on to that peaceful experience. Can't do it.
Yeah.
So not only can I not find any separate controlling entity when I look, I cannot exercise any sort of control over my experience. And that's when sort of a release happens, or a surrendering happens, because there's a recognition there is no separate controlling entity here. There's no ego here. There's nothing here that can take control of Stephen's life.
Wow.
All that I can find for certain, all that I know that cannot be denied, is that awareness is. Consciousness is. That's my essential nature. I can confirm that consciousness is always. Awareness is always here and now. There's never a point in time where I can say awareness is not. So that's my essential nature, and that's all of us. That's everyone's essential nature is awareness or consciousness, and that's what you're left with when the sense of being a separate person or a separate controlling entity or ego, when that's seen clearly to be false, when you see that there is no separate controlling entity, all that's left is awareness. And there's no problem in awareness.
You're listening to Let's Get Real with Alan Taylor on KNEW Talk 910. My guest tonight is Stephen Wingate, and we are talking about awareness and waking up. And if you would like to call and ask Stephen a question, the phone number here tonight is 1-800-490-0908. Stephen, we're coming up on the bottom of the hour already so soon. What you were just saying about there not being any way to control, I just came across something that I was reminded of while you were talking, and it was saying, if we're so in control of our minds, as we think we are generally, then why do we have to learn how to still our mind? Why do we have to sit and meditate and learn how to still this thing if we've got such control over it? And that kind of struck me as an interesting way to see it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've tried for years to still my mind, and it didn't work. It's just my nature is such that I think I just have a very active mind. I mean, there's just a lot of thought going on, and I think that's probably true of most folks who have suffered for years.
Yeah.
Is we tend to have a very active mind, and generally it's all about me and my story. So we learn, we learn of the techniques. Let's try to still the mind, and sometimes it works. I mean, I've had some interesting experience, and I think most folks who have meditated have had interesting experiences. And there are times when, the thinking slows down, and there is sort of a peaceful experience arising, and that can be great. Insights can come during those quiet times, and epiphanies, and all sorts of feelings and sensations.
Yeah.
And
even peak experiences.
Right. And those will come and go.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, and I think the important and the key, or I should say, the reason why it's so important to see that there is no separate controlling entity is because we'll go through these meditative states and have peak experiences and experience joy and peace, and then we'll try to get them back.
Yes, exactly.
And that's just part of that sense of being, in control and saying, well, I had the peaceful experience when I meditated last time. Let's try to get it back. And then you get into psychological suffering.
Exactly.
And then that sense of being in control comes back, and trying to grasp on to the peaceful states and trying to avoid any uncomfortable experience.
And that's where the suffering comes. Stephen, after the bottom of the hour break, I'm going to ask you a few more questions, and I want to also find out where you have some of this stuff that you've just talked about written down that we can read it. You're listening to Let's Get Real on Talk 910 KNEW. I'm Alan Taylor. My guest tonight is Stephen Wingate. We'll be back in just a minute. On Talk 910 KNEW. I'm your host, Alan Taylor. The phone number here is 1-800-490-0908. My guest tonight is Stephen Wingate. So if you would like to ask Stephen a question, please give us a call, 1-800-490-0005. I'm sorry, 1-800-490-0908. We have a little switcheroo on phone numbers here tonight, so we don't get phone calls for another show, which happened to us one show, and it was kind of a nightmare. www.alantaylor.com is my website, ALLINTAYLOR.com. I have all of Stephen's information linked up there. I have him on my homepage right now. You can just click on his name and it'll take you directly to his website. And I will always permanently have his link there on my links page. So, Stephen, I just found over the break this little passage that I was just telling you about, and I wanted to read it to you and ask you what you think.
Okay.
It says, do you know what you are going to be thinking a second from now, or will what you are thinking be based on everything that has come before? If we choose our thoughts and are in control of what is thought, why do we choose to suffer their effects? Why would we have to learn to control the mind if we are the thinker? So I like that. What do you think about that? It's telling us that we are not the thinker. And, this is what we were just talking about before the break.
Right, those initial thoughts arise, and then the secondary thoughts come in and sort of make a judgment. Oh, I like this thought or feeling, or I like this one. Let me hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then another initial or primary thought or feeling or sensation that's uncomfortable will arise, and we'll say, oh, I don't like that one. I'm going to take action to avoid those.
Mm.
And that's where the suffering, the psychological suffering really begins right there. And as we talked about that, there's an implication in those secondary thoughts, and the implication is that there is a separate controlling entity or someone who's in control of the thoughts, and that can choose only the happy ones and avoid the sad.
Exactly.
So, I think, meditation, a lot of insights can come out of it, and it can be helpful, but I think the key really is to see that there is no separate controlling entity there.
And it's mind-blowing when you see that clearly. Right. Kind of changes everything, puts a smile on your face.
Right.
I want to talk to you for a little bit about Nisargadatta, and because you had a very interesting reaction to him, and there was a little coincidence between you and me regarding Nisargadatta, which is that I was explaining to you that the way I kind of found that book was sort of cruising around on Amazon and looking at people's different lists, and finally coming across this big book, I Am That, several times on people's lists, and finally clicking on it and reading the first review that came up there, and this first review said, "Congratulations, if you have found this book, then you're ready. You're ready to wake up." And you said to me, "I wrote that review. That was mine." And so it was very interesting to me that you were led to Nisargadatta, to Sailor Bob, to John Wheeler, as was I. That was my same exact path. I was attracted to Nisargadatta, partly because of your review there, and then you led me. So I was just really interested in that, and you told me that your response to reading Nisargadatta was kind of unusual. Will you tell me about that a little bit?
Yeah, I stumbled across his probably through Amazon. I mean, I've purchased hundreds, if not thousands, of books.
God, me too.
Through Amazon through the years. Thankfully, that stopped.
Yeah, me too.
But in 1998, I stumbled across that book. I saw the title, I Am That, and the name Nisargadatta Maharaj. Now, I've never heard of him I had not heard of him at that point. And I had heard the phrase, I am, or I am that I am, from Moses' experience in, I think it's Exodus, in which he has his experience at the burning bush, and God says, I am that I am. That's my name. So anyway, I that's really all I knew. I saw that the title of the book, I Am That, so I bought it. And
really?
I got it through Amazon, picked it up, and started reading it. And now I had never heard of Nisargadatta. No one had ever mentioned him as far as I knew. I just saw the title and his name and picked it up. As soon as I started reading it, the first two paragraphs, I'd say, there was a tingling, almost a burning in my brain. It's kind of odd to talk about it, but that's what happened. I was absolutely blown away.
Wow.
By his words. He just pointed so directly and just said, "You are the absolute. You are not the person you believed yourself to be."
Wow.
And just as you know, there's about 546 pages of that, and it's all just absolutely mind-blowing. And so that sort of became the book that I turned to for several years, and I felt that I had a pretty good intellectual understanding of what Nisargadatta was talking about, and also some interesting experiences that sort of supported or confirmed what he was saying is actually true in my own experience. So, I mean, I was feeling pretty good that I really didn't need to know, I didn't really need to learn anything else. I think everything was there.
All the pieces were in place.
They're right there, and I just felt like, but I was still suffering.
Yeah.
Still suffering was coming back, and I just felt like I really needed to talk to someone who could speak sort of the same language and speak in the same terminology sort of that Nisargadatta used, with the simplicity and a directness that he speaks with. So I spent some time searching for someone in the sort of Nisargadatta line.
Yeah. Which led you to Sailor Bob.
I stumbled across a website for Sailor Bob, and I was trying to buy some books and CDs and DVDs, I think, last year. And that's where I learned of John Wheeler. And at that point, I think Sailor Bob was becoming busy. And obviously he's in Australia as well, so it would be tough to travel down there and see him. But he mentioned by email he said, "Well, go see John Wheeler. Talk to John Wheeler. He'll take care of you."
And you make this comment that John Wheeler said, "I'll do anything to help you see this."
Right.
And he did.
Right.
That's an incredible statement. And I feel like you're making the same statement now to people who want to be helped by you.
Right. And so I felt I had an intellectual understanding that I felt pretty good, but I was having the suffering. And I met John. I sent an email to John. We corresponded a few times by email. I talked to him on the phone. I flew out, went to his meetings in Santa Cruz, and then we met individually. And things were becoming very clear. But a little bit of the suffering was coming back in, and I called John again or emailed him or both, and I said, I feel like I'm right there. I think I get it. And I just need a little help. And John said, I'll do anything I can based on my experience to help you see this. And I just remember what a sense of relief that I felt. And I just felt, I just thought it was just a great experience to have someone like John say, I'll do whatever I can to help you see this. And then he stuck, I had a few more questions, and he talked on the phone, and the psychological suffering has come to an end.
Has come to an end. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's just really incredible. And I mean, everybody in the listening audience right now should be aware that this is possible for everybody. It is truly possible for everybody. And these teachers are there to help you. We've got John calling from San Leandro with a question or a comment. John, you had a question or comment from my guest?
Well, we were talking about thinking about who we are, and my understanding is that we aren't what we think, we are what we feel. And we are controlled mostly by our hormones, and we can only control our feelings by understanding our feelings. And we can only understand our feelings by meditating on them and feeling them. And that's where meditation becomes important. The old yoga thing that we learned to try to get rid of all thoughts really isn't what the old Brahmins were attempting to do. They were trying to get in touch with what we feel.
Well, Steve, I'm not sure, Stephen, would you agree with that comment that we are what we feel?
Well,
I'm not sure if that's exactly how John worded it, but I just wanted to.
We are what our emotions, our feelings.
On a personal, on a relative and personal level, if you're talking about, as a person, then, I mean, we have feelings and emotions and thoughts, and we have relationships, and we have all of this on a personal level, on a relative level. I mean, but what are you in essence?
I am what I feel, in essence. I'm not my physical thing. I'm not what I think. Unless I understand what my feelings are doing to myself, I don't understand myself.
Yeah, I would say that you're trying to understand the person in your personality. But, I mean, what are you in essence? What is it that witnesses what you feel? What
in
is
essence,
it that's aware?
all my experiences and how I react to all my experiences.
I'm sorry?
No matter what I want to think I am, I'm only what I truly feel unless I understand those feelings and stop trying to escape from them. I don't really understand myself. And I don't have control over myself or my actions unless I understand each button that's pushed and why I feel the way I feel when that button is pushed.
Well, that's isn't that sort of an infinite process there? I mean, will that ever end? Will you ever figure it all out and find out who all?
Well, you're exactly correct. Yeah.
It's infinite.
You can reach a certain. You can always get better at it, and you can always improve on your understanding of yourself.
Well,
the process is what's more important than understanding everything, because as you come upon a new feeling or emotion that you hadn't really dealt with before, then you can study that.
Well, I think this is where the people who get attracted to non-duality, and Stephen, correct me if you think that I'm wrong, is that they just get absolutely sick to death of all of that looking at those feelings. That I know that's how it was for me. I just was sick of it and had to find a way like out of that, just to jump out of that.
It is difficult to look at those things.
Well, I think
from our early childhood, our teenager.
But Stephen, would you tell our caller if you think that it's possible to stop all of that?
Well,
you're asking me.
This is why I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Stephen.
Oh, okay. This is why I put I keep this practical, and that is it's possible to be free of psychological suffering, and I put it as simple as possible. And there are two areas to look at. One is what you are. What is there about yourself that cannot be denied? And if you take a look at that, you'll see that your essence is awareness or consciousness. It's always there. And then in the part two again is what is it that I'm not? What you're not is feelings, thoughts,
but the thing that you can't
and it's possible. And also the real key is seeing that you're not a controlling entity who can control thoughts, feelings, and sensations. And when those two sort of pieces are seen clearly, it's possible to be free of psychologial suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not saying
the only way you can really be free of psychological suffering.
I think you guys can't really hear each other. John, I'm going to let John. Why don't you go ahead with what you were going to say for a moment?
The only way you can be free of psychological suffering is to understand your emotions that are causing you that psychological suffering.
I think Stephen might disagree with that statement. Am I right?
Well, I mean,
okay.
I'm putting words in Stephen's mouth.
Yeah,
I should.
I'll respond to that.
You're on the hot seat.
Okay, just capture a feeling that you've been that's been with you from childhood or adolescence. What your father said to you at one time, what your mother said to you at one time, that really got you. That you try to push back. Try to understand it. Try to deal with it, because that is part of you. That's what pushes your buttons. That makes you react in ways sometimes that you wonder, why did you react like that?
Well,
that's you.
Another way to look at it is that everything everything that's going on in this body and this mind and person that you think you are is just sort of automatic based on everything that came before. Just sort of automatic.
Hormones. Hormones that that you don't have any control of.
So things that your parents said and hormones
sleeping responses, sexual responses,
but that doesn't
survival responses.
But that doesn't. But John, that hold on. It doesn't mean that there's any kind of an entity there. Doesn't mean that there's any kind of a real. That's not the real essence of who you are. Stephen, I'm not doing a very good job. You need to take over for me. First, I'm just going to tell the audience, you're listening to Let's Get Real on Talk 910 KNEW. I'm Alan Taylor, and my guest tonight is Stephen Wingate. Okay, Stephen.
Yes.
What do you have to say? Can we clear up this feelings question once and for all?
Well, I think I see nothing wrong with looking into or watching, feelings and emotions and considering their source and, sort of trying to understand the cause and effect of thoughts and feelings and sensations and looking back at our childhood. I see nothing wrong with that. It's just this is not the sort of the teaching of non-duality or Advaita.
Well,
and a psychological approach, and again, there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, but it does perpetuate suffering. That's one thing that I discovered.
No. If you're just suffering, you're not perpetuating suffering. It's enlightening to understand what controls you when you don't understand.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I spent so long in therapy and really felt like that was. Very, very helpful. So I know exactly what you're saying. I love digging in there and finding out what was motivating me to do this or that until I realized, wait a minute, motivating whom?
Well,
motivating
it is
whom
enlightening,
exactly?
Though, to know what causes you to react in ways that you would rather not react that way.
Well, John,
I think I understand.
John, thank you so much for your call, and we're gonna Stephen's gonna try to wrap it up. Thanks so much for calling. So, Stephen, you have something final you want to say on the subject?
Yeah, I would just say I understand that approach, and I think that the approach that we're talking about, the Advaita or non-duality, sort of blows that all out of the water.
Exactly.
You can be finished with all of that psychological analysis, it's all part of the psychological suffering.
But John was not seeing it as suffering. That brings up kind of an interesting point, doesn't it? That as long as you're going along with that and not seeing yourself as suffering, you're not going to want to be out of it. It's only when you perceive, you admit to yourself, oh my gosh, this is causing me great suffering, that you want to do something about it.
Right. If indeed there is. If John is not experiencing any suffering,
which he clearly was not.
Yeah, based on his analysis, then go for it.
Uh-huh.
That wasn't my experience. I think mine was similar to yours. And after 20 years of trying to understand my personality and what pushed my buttons and what feelings caused what based on how my parents and all of that.
Yeah.
That can go on forever, and the suffering comes back and rears its ugly head.
It always finds a way.
Right.
It always finds a way.
And I think this teaching, the Advaita of non-duality, of seeing that your essence is awareness and you are not a separate controlling person, just completely blows all of that other progressive types of approaches, just blows it out of the water.
It
and
does.
You're done with it.
It does. So maybe one of the prerequisites of becoming attracted to the non-duality approach is really just being absolutely sick of all that psychological digging around. I mean, maybe that's one of the prerequisites.
It was for me.
Yeah, it was for me too. It was for me too. Well, let's talk a little bit about the I. You talk about the I that wakes up when you first wake up in the morning. Would you talk about that a little bit? When you wake up in the morning and you haven't identified that I yet.
Yeah, this is sort of and I read this from Nisargadatta, and it was an interesting experience. We're told, look for this I, look for the me or the I that we think we are. And there can be sort of a struggling to, well, what do you mean? How can I possibly do this? And then I'm pretty sure it's Nisargadatta mentions, watch when you wake up in the morning, the sense of the ego, the I, wakes up in the morning. And also you can see the I or the me, the ego, the sense of being a separate person, you can see that fade off and go away when you go to sleep. It sort of dissolves as you slowly drift into sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see it when you wake up in the morning and when you go to sleep at night. When you wake up in the morning, the first thought upon awakening is I, and then your story follows. I have to go to work. I have to get up and have breakfast. So the I, you can watch. This is something that anyone can watch, and you just recognize it, that I, in the morning, I wakes up, and you can see, oh, that's the sense of personal, the sense of being a separate person. That's the me, the ego that I thought I was, and it's just a thought, and then a story. So what wakes up is the I thought, and then your personal story. Now, something has to be there to witness that. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to witness it.
Right.
There is a presence of awareness has to be there when this I thought wakes up in the morning.
Exactly.
I thought in the story. And then that's when it struck me, that's awareness is prior to the I in my story.
That's right.
And that's my essential nature. I am awareness.
That comes before the I thought even appears.
Right.
That's that simple.
So that's a very practical sort of approach or observation that
huge.
Anyone can make when you wake up every morning.
Yeah, practice that in the morning. It's fantastic. We have another caller. Trish is calling from Oakland, and she has more thoughts on this idea about feelings. Hi, Trish. Welcome to Let's Get Real.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Trish.
What's on your mind?
I like your show.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, in response to the caller, John, because I understand what he's saying, and it's good to become aware of what happened to you in your life and how it makes you feel. but it's kind of like that happened to me, and I feel a certain way about it, but it's not who I am. It's just something that happened, and I think that people sometimes get too fixated on what happened and how it makes them feel and identify with it.
It's very easy to do that, isn't it? It's what we're very conditioned to do that.
Yeah, and I think that, yes, it happened, and I acknowledge it, and it's healthy to acknowledge it, but it's not who I am. And based on what I get from your shows, it's kind of like something you experience, but it's not who I am, and I don't have to be limited by it or identify with it.
Right.
Although it's healthy to acknowledge it, but let it go. Experience it and let it go, because it's something that comes and passes.
Yeah, just like all thoughts. No, absolutely. You said it beautifully. Just like all thoughts do. When you're sitting here and I have a thought about, some thing that I have to take care of in some relationship of mine, and I think, well, there's no reality to that. It's just a thought.
Well, yeah, and he was talking about the feelings, and based on realizing things that happened in the past, and it's like, yeah, that did happen, and I feel a certain way, and sometimes I get triggered by it, but that is it. It's not me.
Yeah. Stephen, you want to add something?
Yes, exactly. I would say that, we all have our own memories and experiences and our own personality. So that's who we are as a person, we can say, is we are, as a person, we are our memories and our experiences and our relationships and our thoughts, feelings, sensations. That's who we are as a person. But that's not who we are in essence. So this teaching points to who we are in essence. And obviously, I'm Stephen. I'm here in Boston. Alan's, you're in San Francisco, and the caller is out in California somewhere too. So we're all different people. We have our own personalities, our own memories, and there's no denying that. But this teaching points to what you are in essence. And what we are in essence is the awareness. The awareness that all of us, all three of us that are on the phone and all of the listeners, we're all hearing these words right now. There's an awareness of this experience. It's right now.
And the same awareness is looking out of all three of our pairs of eyes.
Right.
The same awareness.
Right. That's what we all. That's what we all are in essence. Now, there's no denying we're separate people on a relative and personal level, and it can be interesting to look into our feelings and our histories and our relationships and all of that. But that's not who we are in essence. So, Trish, that's pretty much exactly what you were saying, right?
Well, exactly.
Okay.
I think that you begin to realize that I experienced that, but it's not me.
Yeah, it's not you in essence.
It's not who I am. It was an experience, and it's gone right now.
We're at the end of the hour, Trish. Thank you so much for your call.
Thank you.
Well, it goes fast when we've got a guest, doesn't it? Stephen, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. You were really a fantastic guest.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining me here tonight on Let's Get Real. You can find out more about the show on my website, www.alantaylor.com. That's ALLINTAYLOR.com. You'll find Stephen's website linked up right on my homepage now, and he's always on my links page. So go check it out. He has a lot of wonderful correspondence and some writings up there. And, of course, he gives meetings twice a week in Arlington, Massachusetts, as well as phone conversations, do you not?
Right.
That's fantastic. So thank you, Stephen, for doing all that you're doing. I really appreciate what you do. So go check out Stephen's website. I'd like to thank my producer, Jamie. I'd also like to thank my callers tonight. I'll be here next week at the same time, Sunday at 6 p.m. on Talk 910 KNEW. I'm Alan Taylor. See you next week.